the City of Ferrara, I'm very pleased to host the third Project Steering Committee meeting of the Perfect Project, which sees us as a partner. For this administration, the theme of green infrastructure is strongly interwoven with the policies of rehabilitation of the urban, social, and economic fabric and sustainable territorial development of the city, based on its historical and architectural value. In 1895, the prestigious UNESCO World Heritage Site was awarded to the historical center of the city of Ferrara with the name City of Renaissance, as a marvelous example of a city designed in a Renaissance, which preserves its historical center. In 1999, the recognition was extended to its territory and to the Po Delta, which testified to the uninterrupted work of a man in maintaining the balance between land and water. For years, our administration has been committed to reducing the consumption of soil, which we consider a non-renewable resource, precious of the environment and for the economy. One of the strategic aims for our administrative mandate is working on the existing city by promoting urban regeneration initiatives with intervention on important sector of the city and green infrastructure. These are complex and time-consuming processes and require complex preliminary activities, especially for the search for solid partners and necessary financing. European project, the Perfect Project in particular, can be of great help. I conclude briefly mentioning of the total review of the urban law that our Emilia-Romagna region completed in December 2017. The new urban law recognized the important and strategic nature of the green infrastructure and inserted the debate in a legislative framework. I'm sure that from this session of work and from the project in general, important indication and concrete operation guidelines will emerge. I don't want to steal any more time. I'm sorry for not being able to follow the process of the meeting, and I wish you a productive and pleasant stay in Ferrara.
Grazie mille, Mayor. And we are delighted to be here today. We feel very lucky to have the opportunity to learn about how the city of Ferrara has become such a green and beautiful city, and to learn about its planning and its development throughout the years. We want to say thank you very much for taking the time to come to talk to us, and finally to say Forza Spal. Okay, and welcome from the TCPA to everybody here today. I thought it would be quite useful, because we have our stakeholders joining us this morning, for us briefly to just go around the room and say who you are and where you have come from today. So can I start from the right, perhaps with Hannes?
Yeah, my name is Hannes Leitner. I'm from Styria, and I'm the external consultant for the provincial government of Styria.
My name is Andrea Teschinek. I come from Styria, from the Styrian government.
Good morning, my name is Silvia Forstenlechner. I come from Graz, Styria, Austria, and I'm a special planner for Styrian communities.
Hi, my name is Christoph Jambrovic. I'm from the Styrian government.
Hi, my name is Gernot Bahr. I'm also a stakeholder from
Good Good morning. My name is Alessandra Piganti. I work at the Municipality of Ferrara and I work at the International Relations and European Funding Office. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Riley and I work in transport planning for Cornwall Council in the UK.
Good morning. My name is Jeanette Smith. I work in public health for Cornwall Council in the UK.
Hello, I'm Phil Mason. I work in planning in the UK in Cornwall.
Good morning, Robert Lacey. I work in planning policy in the UK.
Good morning, I'm Diane Smith from the Town and Country Planning Association.
And I'm Jessie Feith, also from the Town and Country Planning Association.
Cristiano Rinaldo from Ferrara, Ufficio di Piano.
Good morning, I'm Geertje Wuiten from the Planning and Sustainable Department in Amsterdam.
Good morning, I'm Agnes Holsteiner and the Amsterdam project manager of the Perfect project.
Good morning, my name is Mark Gabor. I'm for the project manager for the Hungarian project part.
My name is Gábor Béres. I'm an urban designer and planner in Hungary, and I'm an external expert for the Hungarian partner.
Good morning, I'm Gaia Trbișan. I come from the Regional Development Agency of Ljubljana Urban Region.
Hello, my name is Petra Vertelnaret. I come from Slovenia and I'm a stakeholder for the Perfect project. Slovenia.
Good morning, I'm Zala Erman. I also come from Slovenia and I'm a stakeholder from the Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning.
Good morning, I'm Michal Trtvam. I'm from Slovakia. I'm a member of regional district, Bratislava County Parliament, and I'm a CEO of Bratislava District Office.
Good morning, my name is Michal Šutriebka, and I am a stakeholder from Ministry of Environment of Slovak Republic.
Good morning, my name is Eric Dish. I work at the Amsterdam government in the Netherlands, and the project I'm working on right now is the project of greening the school playgrounds. I'm going to tell about it tomorrow morning.
Hello, my name is Imke van Moorselaar. I work for the City of Amsterdam at the Public Health Service.
Good morning, my name is Rob Bakker. I'm working in the City of Amsterdam from the Finance Department.
Good morning, I'm Silvia Mazzanti. I work for the Municipality of Ferrara Special Planning Office.
I'm Milenia Kramer. And I'm the project manager of Ferrara. The communication manager of Perfect in Ferrara.
Okay, finally, my name is Antonella Maggipinto. I'm from Ferrara. I am a colleague of Antonio.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We have all of the microphones working, which is good. And it's amazing to have such a range of experience and expertise in the room from 7 different countries. And we hope the next 2 days will be an inspiring example of what is being achieved in developing green infrastructure across Europe. And that you will take lots from the presentations and learning for your own action plans for the next couple of years. I'm just going to run through the agenda for today. So starting off with a replacement, unfortunately, Peter Massini, who was due to give our expert presentation, has unfortunately not been able to join us because he has a very bad leg injury. and cannot walk. So you will have me instead giving the expert presentation. So apologies for that, but it will be slightly shorter than imagined. So we will have some extra time after the presentation for, we hope, partners to talk a little bit about their planning systems. The main objective of today's agenda is to talk about how planning and land use planning is being used to deliver green infrastructure across Europe. Many of the partners are looking specifically at planning and its potential in their policies and in their policy instruments. So I'll be hearing from Hertha from Amsterdam about Plan Amsterdam and their green policies. We will have a workshop on how we are using the planning system to deliver green infrastructure across Europe and what we can learn from effective implementation and examples of this. We will then have a feedback session after the workshop. We will have lunch in the town hall. And then in the afternoon, we hear the rain is apparently going to stop. So we will have our cycling trip still in the afternoon, but a shorter one than planned. So you will have a bit of a break before we then have dinner. And this has been brought forward slightly to 7:30, not 8:30, because some Europeans, including ourselves, cannot survive the longer evenings. We do not have the stamina of our Italian partners. So I'm just going to load up Peter's presentation. My Italian is not so good. Thank you. Grazie. So Peter was very sorry not to join us this morning. We invited him to come and talk because there has been some fantastic work recently by the Mayor of London to try to install green infrastructure within the planning system of London. In particular, London has used some learning from across Europe in the shape of a tool for planning called the Green Space Factor. And the Green Space Factor was transferred through an Interreg project back in 2009 called GRABS. And GRABS was also led by us at the Town and Country Planning Association. And through GRABS, the Green Space Factor was transferred from Malmo over to Sutton and Southampton in England. And then in the last year, London has taken this on. So it shows the impact and power of interregional learning to make a real difference in policy and practice. So I'm going to go through Peter's slides. He sent over some notes. And if you have any questions, then I will try my very best. But perhaps we can also have a follow-up with Peter as well, if you have any questions as well. So London is a green city. This is on part due to its history. Unlike many other European cities, like Ferrara, it wasn't built as a defensive citadel. Therefore, it grew organically, absorbing surrounding fields and areas of countryside as it grew. These green spaces were subsequently protected through the introduction of planning rules, which recognized that open space was essential as a part of a thriving city, especially as they provided spaces for fresh air and exercise, which became increasingly important for the urban working class. And this was especially during the Industrial Revolution, which saw very poor levels of quality of life in the centre city. And so these green spaces around the capital became even more vital for Londoners. As early as 1943, with the publication of the County of London Plan, the protection of green spaces became a central tenet of planning policy. And this has remained a constant ever since. However, despite the importance of protecting green space, it is not necessarily a policy that by itself is fit for purpose in a modern, growing city. Green space may end up being simply the space between buildings, so-called amenity space, or space that performs very limited functions, such as underused sports pitches. Consequently, in the 1980s, planning policy and land management practice began to adopt the principles of urban ecology. In addition to many green spaces being identified for protection because of their nature conservation value, rather than just their recreation value, parks began to be managed to encourage more habitats for wildlife. Fairly simple techniques, such as the creation of wildflower meadows and reed beds, transform the ecological value of these spaces. Again, these policies were successful, but the focus was still on protecting and conserving special spaces, rather than thinking about how they could be better integrated with the built environment. I think those are the flowering meadows which I was talking about before. So London's current economic, social, and environmental context requires us to refine the policy framework even further. London's population is growing. It currently stands at about 8.5 million, the same as it was in 1940 when many people lived in overcrowded slums. But it is expected to rise to around 12 million by 2050. This population needs to be accommodated within London's existing urban boundary. So London's population is growing, as you can see from this chart. There's an expected population growth, as I say, by around 12 million by 2050, but this could also go as high as 13.4 million. Given the scale of growth of London, it's possible to go even higher than this. The city also faces environmental challenges such as poor air quality and climate change. In order to develop a new, up-to-date policy framework to address these challenges and to develop a more integrated suite of policies appropriate for a growing city, the current mayor has initiated the production of a new set of strategies and a new London plan. The London Environment Strategy, as you can see on this slide, covers issues such as air quality, waste management, climate change mitigation, and climate change adaptation. It also includes a core theme of establishing a network of green infrastructure and promoting the economic value of this green infrastructure through the concept of natural capital. Adopting the term green infrastructure is particularly important in London. It ensures that we discuss the management of the green parts of the city in the same ways as we discuss the other infrastructure, such as pipes, cable roads, and rails that makes a city function. It defines it as something that is essential rather than just nice to have. Importantly, the principles of green infrastructure are also being incorporated into other mayoral strategies. A major new theme in the transport strategy is the concept of healthy streets, which promotes streets as public realm, as well as thoroughfares for vehicles, and the need to green this public realm to encourage more walking and cycling and to contribute to improving air quality. Similarly, the new health inequalities strategy recognizes the importance of green infrastructure to improving public health, and particularly the inequalities in health outcomes across London. But it is the London plan, which is the city's spatial development framework, that contributes most to shifting and refining the policy framework. In addition to including policies on the protection of recreational green space and nature conservation sites, it includes a suite of more proactive policies that encourage river restoration, sustainable drainage, the planting of trees, and the greening of buildings through green roofs and green walls. Apparently this slide is animated. I don't know what that means. There we go. So what does this new policy framework look like in practice? It has resulted in an increasing number of rivers being broken out of concrete channels and restored to a more natural course, as we can see through the animation. This is done primarily to improve flood management and improve water quality to enable better quality waterfront development downstream. But it has the additional benefit of improving the quality of the park and providing better habitats for wildlife. We have another animated slide. The redundant amenity spaces between houses, especially on housing estates, has been transformed, there we go, into gardens and growing spaces which not only improve the visual appeal of the space, but create spaces which bring people together. They play an important role, particularly in promoting social inclusion. We have also begun to reimagine and repurpose the underused grey space in the city. Space that is used only for car parking is being made available to a wider range of users, as well as incorporating features that help adapt the city to climate change. This dead-end street in East London has been converted into a civic space and walking and cycling routes, which also incorporate sustainable drainage. All the water from the roofs of the building is directed into the central bioswale before slowly being released into the drainage network. Hundreds of similar projects are now being implemented across the city. London is now fast becoming the European capital for green roofs. This could be debatable, looking at Akenils in Amsterdam. The latest assessment indicates that there are now over 100 hectares of green roof in London, and more are being installed every day. Importantly, green infrastructure is increasingly being integrated with the walking and cycling network to encourage more active travel. This cycle hire hub is located on the edge of a park and includes sustainable drainage systems to take runoff from the surrounding hard surfaces. These different elements of green infrastructure can be brought together to inform and shape urban regeneration projects. The new developments surrounding the Olympic Park, shown in this slide, include an integrated network of green roofs, pocket parks, swales, and green corridors to provide pathways for people, wildlife, and water, which mimics a more ecological approach to connectivity through the urban environment. The new wetlands which lie at the end of these pathways are designed primarily to reduce flooding and improve water quality, but also provide high-value wildlife habitats and pleasant, tranquil spaces for people to retreat from the noise and pollution of surrounding streets. Importantly, these spaces aren't traditional parks surrounded by fences. They are designed to be part of the city, not something separate from it. A similar approach at a regeneration site at Woodbury Down, where a project has incorporated greening and new walking and cycling routes within the built environment and enables access to an adjacent reservoir, which had been fenced and inaccessible previously for over 100 years. There were wildlife benefits here too. New reed beds had been created as one of the reservoirs. And to strengthen this new policy framework, we have begun to properly account for the economic value of the green infrastructure asset. The new methodology of natural capital accounting, which is gradually being embraced by the national government, clearly shows that maintaining and managing green infrastructure has significant economic benefits, particularly with respect to health. The return on investment for green infrastructure is much higher than the return on investment for other infrastructure assets. The main problem is that the benefits provided are public goods, not tradable commodities or services. So the current market-based economic model does not always value the real economic value of green infrastructure. I think that was the slide for the last bit of that. So just to reiterate, this approach being taken by the mayor, which has been seen as a real show of leadership for the rest of the country. It's important to say that London as a government is very unique in England. It's the only regional tier of government, and all of the boroughs, the 33 boroughs in London, all have to create their own planning policies in line with the London plan. So the approach they've taken on natural capital has been recognised more by central government as part of their work, trying to create a framework for natural capital across the country. So some of these statistics are really quite striking. For each £1 spent by local authorities and their partners on public green space, this approach has been shown that Londoners enjoy at least £27 in value. Another key statistic is that Londoners avoid £950 million per year in health costs due to public green space. So this really shows the public asset that green infrastructure is, and how we have to approach new methodologies to make sure that it is maintained, improved, and developed as further green infrastructure across the UK. So thank you. I've been Peter Messini for today. I previously worked at the Mayor of London's office, so I can hopefully try to answer some questions about the work of the London plan. What's really unique for us as the TCPA in this work is how the Greater London Authority is integrating the transport, the health, the environment strategies, the housing strategies all together at the same time within the London plan. And this shows the potential of partnership working for green infrastructure. And the reason that they have been able to integrate the green space factor within the London plan is because of bringing all of these people together at a local level. And this is one of the things we want to try and encourage all of the partners in the Perfect Project to do, to bring together all of those champions of green space to make sure that it is installed within planning policy and investment strategies. Any questions at all? Christine? So this is a question which my response will be a bit limited on. However, we understand that they have particularly embraced the green points approach as part of the green space factor. So the way that it works in the approach that they're taking is the green space has a value between 0 and 1 based on how permeable it is. So a hard standing surface would have a very low score. A more permeable, greener surface would have a higher score between 0 and 1. And developers, when they put forward an application for a new development, are scored based on the resulting permeability and the resulting green space that comes out of the development between 0 and 1. And they must meet a certain threshold in order to obtain planning permission. In terms of the way that it is being carried out, I think this is something that we may need to speak to Peter about, so we can have a follow-up conversation with him. He's also agreed to write an expert presentation, an expert paper, rather, on the green space factor and how it has developed from when we were in the GRABS project through to its adoption in the London plan, when the London plan is going through its examination in the summer. Hannes.
Sorry. As I understood, the London plan is a strategic framework bringing together the different strategies. And is it somehow legally binding, or how is it brought into life? For example, if the political system might change, is it something that is sustainably there and will be there for the next years? And is it, well, legally binding, or is it only a strategy level?
So this is something I can talk about. Thank you. Yes, it is legally binding. It is the most important strategy in London because it is statutory, and it is the statutory instruments that is used to determine planning applications, but also it is used by the 33 boroughs in London to prepare their own borough plans, which is used by the council to determine planning applications. In terms of the longevity of the plan, if a new mayor comes in, then they have the power to create a new plan. The London plan is also updated regularly with changes based on national changes to planning policy. It requires a 2/3 majority through the London Assembly. So the London Assembly keeps the mayor in check and makes sure that his policies are representing the views of Londoners. But it's important to make the distinction between those strategies like the environment, health and transport strategy, which do not have that legal binding. The London plan is the statutory spatial framework for how London will develop. Susanna. I think that's a really important question about the implementation of the green space factor. My understanding is that in the London plan, the green space factor is initiated, and then the implementation of it will be determined by the individual boroughs. So how it is enacted will be the responsibility of the individual boroughs for new developments. But again, I think it's something which will be covered in the expert paper, and we can also talk to Peter in a bit more detail. Sorry, that's a bit limited. Hette?
Yeah. Henry, do you know anything about how stakeholders or the London people were involved in creating the London plan, because we in Amsterdam have to create a new plan for everything, integral plan in the 2 years, and we have to involve the public to make this plan.
This is something which was actually emphasized quite a lot in the recent London plan, which was consulted on in the last few weeks, because previously there has been criticism of the mayor that the London plan is not well understood by anybody except for well-educated members of the public. However, this time they actually went to a lot of effort, not only in the look of the plan, so they employed some graphic designers to try and make it look like a more interesting document than previously, to try and make the language a bit more accessible, and also held a number of consultation events. So the consultation period was 10 weeks, which some people said maybe wasn't long enough, but they accompanied the consultation with events with community groups. We also have groups in London and across England that produce neighbourhood plans. So it's a voluntary plan that can be produced by parish councils or groups of neighbours, community groups. And the neighbourhood plans must also be in line with the London plan. So it was very important for the mayor to try to make it clear what the London plan is and to consult on it. So in summary, it was an improvement this time on the consultation on the London plan, but the most difficult element is the time that's needed to reach those people who do not already know about planning, so the more deprived communities. And actually, as a TCPA, we have just received a successful project application to consult more with local people, more deprived local people, inaccessible, on the London plan. I think we have a...
I have one question. In Bratislava, in Slovakia, we have lots of problems with cars because people, they are addicted to the cars. They like it so much. And we have some problems like in the Western countries and cities maybe 30 or 40 years ago. And we have lots of problems with this because people, they don't care about parks, about playgrounds, about nothing. They care just about parking of their cars. And we start some strategies, but it was some kind of revolution from the people, and they were very angry for us because we changed some public space using of this public space. So what's your idea or your experience in this way? Because for communication, for changing of the thinking of the people, because it's the cruel for us. For this green strategy, because we need to change the thinking of the people for it.
Thank you. Again, a really important question. One approach is, which we learnt about in Ljubljana, where you can close off the city for roadworks, and then when people are used to there being no cars in the city centre, you can then say it's pedestrianised, but it's maybe not always possible. But yeah, a huge problem in London as well. Everybody wants to drive around, and parking is seen as being a right. People feel like they have a right to park. In London, one of the approaches that is being taken has been the congestion charge in the centre of London. So making it more expensive to drive in the centre of London. There's also been lots of investment in cycling to try and encourage and incentivize people to cycle. However, it still remains a big problem, and air pollution is one of the biggest political issues in London because it's very bad. In the first month of 2018 in London, we already exceeded the targets for the entire of 2018 set by the EU for air pollution. So it's a real problem. No easy solutions, but it comes down to incentives, we think, to try to get people out of their cars, using public transport, walking and cycling. And we do have a very good public transport system in London. Eric?
Well, I can also say that in the Netherlands we have local government elections this month, and many policy, they have the idea of putting less cars in the city. And what really makes me happy is that most of the people, they think this is a good idea. So it's a trend which we have for years now, that policy try to keep the cars away, and they make a good infrastructure by public transport, and it helps. So people are not stupid. They know that it's bad with the air pollution. So I think this is the only future that we have to keep especially the center of the cities car free, or a really small amount of cars. I think this will be the only future.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any other suggestions on the question of trying to reduce the level of car use and create this space for green infrastructure?
We have the same topics and problems in Austria as well, and there is an ongoing discussion on how you can change people's minds on that. Because as professionals, as planners, as people dealing with these issues, we all agree that we should have a walkable city and a human scale city and not a car scale city. And one project that is going on in Austria now is funded by the government, and it's called the Urban Mobility Labs. We're trying to implement innovation zones. So it's more or less a temporary stage for one area where you can try out different measures on reducing individual mobility. And the thing behind it is that you either you stick with strict regulations and you do something and you get maybe revolution-style protests from the public, or you can convince them by taking slow steps. So it's only temporary measures, for example, in the city center, do it for 1 month or 2 months and look what happens, and communicate that this is only a temporary issue, and then try something else and look what works out best, and slowly convince people on showing them that there is an alternative to their form of transport. But overall, you have to improve public transport, and you have to improve walking and cycling infrastructure.
Thank you, Johannes. Any other contributions on that really important topic? Imke?
I'm not sure if you have it in Bratislava, but I think what is also helpful in Amsterdam is that we have the non-governmental organization Friends of the Earth, and they are very active in addressing the issue of air quality, and that is very bad for health. So they're protesting also very hard, but from the other way around. So maybe if you have these organizations, you can support them in some sort of way, so that they also get a platform to inform the public and raise awareness of the problem. If I hear you, then there's also a problem of that people are not really aware. They think the car is more important, maybe, than their health. So that could also be a thing to take into your mind.
Thank you, Imke. Any other questions on the presentation or comments on Gabor?
Just my question is concerning to the green space factor you mentioned, and I'm just wondering how detailed is that scoring system? You mentioned that from 0 to 1, because there are hundreds of different types of surface finishes, and they result basically different result on the microclimate of a specific area. So I'm just wondering how detailed is that scoring?
Thank you, Gabor. I may actually bring in Diane on this point. Diane, do you know much about from GRABS and the use of the green space factor by Malmo, the level of sophistication that's used?
The green space factor itself was a principle of establishing percentages within any new development. And what we found, I'm not sure about the detail in Malmo, but when Southampton started to adopt it in the UK, they turned it into a very technical exercise. And so I don't know, as Henry doesn't, exactly what London is doing, but the impression that we had from Southampton and indeed Mersey Forest in the north of England was that they adapted the factor to suit the circumstances of the development that was happening. And so it was a joint agreement, but the key thing was it was a process that had to be gone through before planning permission was given. And that was the key difference, but I can't answer in terms of the actual detail of it.
So again, Gabor, I think this is something that it'd be really good for us to follow up with Peter to learn about exactly how they're implementing it in London. Great, there's lots of interest. Susanna. That'd be very useful, Susanna. I think what is really important for us as part of this project is to create those examples and create those stories of where you have managed to influence your policymakers and politicians about installing these new policies and strategies so that other municipalities can do the same and can also use those inspiring examples and to learn about how you've achieved it, and also about the evidence and about the technical details to answer questions so they feel confident when they're trying to get those policies adopted. So yes, that'd be good to learn more. That might be helpful. Thank you. Any other questions on the presentation before we hand over to Herte? Okay, thank you. I mean, just to finish that off, we at the TCPA are maybe slightly biased because we are the oldest planning institute in the world, but we think planning is visionary. We think planning can have such a vital impact on how you create great places that it's the only way that you can bring people together holistically to create a future that creates good outcomes for people and places. So yeah, we're really delighted that this is a topic of today's conversation. So I'm going to hand over now to Herte, who's going to talk about Plan Amsterdam and the green policies.
Hi. Yeah, you can hear me. So thank you, Henry, for the presentation. And a lot of the things I think that I'm going to say are a bit similar to what is happening in London, but of course we have a different scale, and Amsterdam is much smaller than London. But I think we can learn a lot from you, and I will tell you what is happening in Amsterdam right now. So I'm working at the Physical and Sustainability Department in Amsterdam, especially on greening the city and making the city more climate resilient in the rainproof platform. And since Amsterdam is growing in a rapid space, and we have before 2025, we have to build more than 50,000 new dwellings, new houses in the city. Things are really changing in Amsterdam, and that's why we did a survey on green strategies for the future, and that's what I'm going to tell you about. And I can take a few more minutes than I had, so that's really nice. So what I'm going to talk about is first I give you some context. So what are the facts and challenges that we face in Amsterdam? Then I will talk about what we did in recent periods when we were also growing in a very rapid pace. And then I will explain what we think is a strategy for the green infrastructure future in Amsterdam. So this is Amsterdam. And you can see that Amsterdam is surrounded by a lot of green space. We call it our green wedges. So Amsterdam has like approximately 850,000 inhabitants. And we still feel, because of the way, like a finger model, we call it, that a city is planned, we still feel that it's a green city, because everywhere you live, you have access to green parks and green space. In the city itself, we have 39 parks. We have more than 30 hectares of green roofs. So we were just calculating that that's maybe even better than London has. Well, it's not a competition, of course, but we have a lot of green areas in the neighborhoods. People love to put some flowers outside on the streets and things like that. We also have a lot of green playgrounds and a lot of people biking to and in these green areas. So this is a picture of our structural vision. So it was like a bit like the London plan, but then the one we made for Amsterdam in 2011. And what I just talked about is that in 2 years, we have to create a new plan, but that will be more integral as this one. This was the first plan where we integrated sustainability into the physical planning, but next time we will have to integrate all themes in this plan, so it will be, well, a challenge. This is a picture from a few years ago, but it shows also that like the line in the, what do you say, above is the hotel guests we expect in Amsterdam. So these are really growing. So we get more and more tourists in the city. Also the inhabitants. So we expect in 2034 to have over 1 million inhabitants in the city. So yeah, we have to create new dwellings to accommodate that. And because of the big growth, people talk about this period in Amsterdam as the third golden age. We had 2 before, and this can be a new golden age. But it can only be a golden age, we think, if the city stays a livable city. That's what we like now in Amsterdam. It's small, it's green, it's very cozy, you can say. But will that be the case in a few decades when the city is growing like it's growing now? So here is a picture of the former prison area in Amsterdam that is transformed right now into a living area. And here you can see the company that won the prize to create this redevelopment. And it shows that they have really green plans. I mean, we build high-rise buildings because we want to accommodate all the dwellings within the city borders. So that's what you see, but you see also a lot of green space still left within the borders. But our worry right now is that it will be this way and that it won't, in the end, when it's finished, that there's no green, but only houses. So that's what we worry right now. So because of that, it's not the same as the green space factor, but we have set new targets 2 months ago to assure that all public amenities, like also sports and schools, but also green space, is set in new development areas. Because there was a big worry also from the public that if we will build the way we do right now, that there will be no green space left. So this is what is decided upon right now. It's a start, we think, because it can be maybe even better. But the good thing is that we have a difference between public green space, so that's really like accessible space, maybe little pocket parks or parks that are really well used. But we have also ecosystem green space, and that is space where the biodiversity is more important and the climate adaptation. So this can be green space on a roof or on the facade, but also like an ecological zone or something like that. So we have to still see, it's decided upon, but we have to see what will really happen now that we set these targets. And well, as you all know, the evidence of the multiple benefits and value of green infrastructure is growing. We've discussed it a lot, and we learned from last time from the presentation of Atje, and we are also looking at all these different strategies that are developed in cities. And Susanna named a few, and we also look at Stockholm. I'm not exactly sure how they call it, but it's like a green space factor that is also really interesting to look at. And we are conducting a new survey of our own, and it has just started, and we expect the results in May. And we focus, so not only on the ecosystem surveys that are a bit more technical and easy to calculate, but also on the user values. We think it's really important. So what is the effect of green on psychological health, on social cohesion and things like that? And it's more difficult to calculate, but we really want to incorporate it into our study. So, well, I can present, or we can discuss next time what we came up with. So these are all facts about what's happening now in Amsterdam. And the big question is, so I said in 2034 we have expectedly 1 million people, but can we accommodate them like in the parks we have right now? If you look at this, is a picture of the Vondelpark. It's so overcrowded that sometimes we even have fights in the parks because of the amount of people that want to go in there, especially on a hot day. So that's a challenge we have. Another thing is that we have to challenge of like heat and rain in the city, and this is a picture of the area very close to where I live that was really flooded. And so how can we create a healthy and climate resilient city? And what we did is we looked at former periods, the strategy we choose then, and then we found out that every time that we had a golden age and a big growth, there was a big investment in green infrastructure. And so this is the city center. It looks really green, mostly because of all the trees that have been planted. And that was the strategy we had in the first golden age. So Amsterdam was really small, and we had canals. And what we did, we planted systemically, along the canals. We started planting trees, and that's how we became a real tree city. We have now like a million trees in the city, and they are of big importance to us. So that was the first strategy. Then, but we were really small. Then in the second golden age, we started creating big city parks that are popular, very popular even now. And that's what was the strategy because of the worry for the public health. So that was the reason that we started creating these. And as a result, you can see the biggest park, I can't show it, but the one on the left, that's the Vondelpark. That's a very popular park in Amsterdam. So these were what we did in former periods, but the last 4 years, we started growing slightly, and we also invested in our green infrastructure. We had 20 million euros, and we made a green agenda. So with a focus on what things we created, you can see over here. On the right bottom, you can see that we invested in the city parks. So we already have a lot of city parks. We didn't have the money to create new ones, but we focused on creating more, assuring that more people can use these parks. So we have a lot of parks that are not so well used. And here's a picture of the Sloterplas where we created the beach. And it was really popular. So now people come to this park, especially for this. And before they didn't even know this park. On the top right, you see one of the examples of the green school yards that we created. And Eric's going to discuss this tomorrow. On the bottom left, you can see how we invested in green infrastructure for like a network. So we think it's really important that people can cycle and walk in green space. And this is an area that is really very beautiful, and it's it connects different parks in the South X district, which is an office district. And on the top, the bottom left, you can see how we invested in green roofs. And the last 3 years, we created 40,000 square meters of new green roofs because we have a big subsidy for that. And we think it's needed because without subsidy, it's difficult to achieve it. So that's what we did in last periods. And what is our strategy for the future? Here you can see that different from the periods before, now we are building only within the city borders, and that's that's difficult because then the pressure on the public green space is becoming bigger and bigger. And what are the solutions for that? We looked at very successful big cities around the world and what they did, and we saw that they have big investments in green infrastructure to try to create a livable city and an attractive city. And we think that is also, we can learn from that in our city. So what we did is we first looked at, the proportion, the way Amsterdam is growing now. If you look at how many more green space you should need in this stage, then you should need like 12 new Vondelparks in the city. If you let the green space grow according to the amount of people. And we looked at places where we can create new Vondelparks, but of course that's not possible because it's too expensive and we have to tear houses down, and we're not going to do that. So that's our first conclusion, that it's not possible to create new parks within the city. So we think that the focus should be on quality. So we look at how to create more attractive green space that is already existing, but it's not attractive in this at this time. We try to make the green infrastructure as diverse as possible, because we have a very diverse public, and inhabitants are really different as well, and we need a diverse infrastructure. We try to make the green infrastructure more public, improve the network, and we're thinking of designing metropolitan parks, and I will show you some more in detail what we think of. This is the diversity we have right now. So we have green accessible roofs. We have the green urban open space in the office districts. We have a lot of allotment gardens that are accessible, and we have, on the right below, in the city forest, we have this fun forest area for kids. It shows that we have a diverse green space, and that is really loved by the public, and we intend to discuss even more in the future with people, also people living in the more deprived area, what they need, and plan according to that. We also have these allotment gardens with a fence surrounding it. It's not only the problem with the allotment gardens, but also our graveyards. Is that a word? Yeah, that's a word. Graveyards, and also a lot of schoolyards and other places that are not accessible right now, and we try to make them more accessible, but it's really difficult because people owning these or renting these allotment gardens are not, I mean, they don't really like everyone coming to their allotment garden park, but otherwise they will go away in the end. So this is the only way they can stay, we think. And we also look at creating a new green-blue network. We have a bit of this network already existing, but we think that it's really important to connect all the green space in the city, and also to have like a healthy corridor for the pedestrians and the cyclists to use. And then finally, we're thinking of developing new metropolitan parks. So these are the green wedges I was talking about, and a lot of these areas are not accessible because it's agricultural land, or it's not owned by the city of Amsterdam. So this is really, it's going to be a big challenge, because we have to talk with the province and all the municipalities and to get them together to create new parks, and they could maybe look like this. So they're going to be well used, and a lot of sports facilities will be there. So this is the strategy. We think it's a lot about quality, but not only. And we think there's maybe some innovative ways of creating even parks in the city on the roofs. But yeah, well, it's a really funny picture, because you see even sheep on the roofs if you look really well. So it's not. This is not right now in Amsterdam, but it will be maybe in the future. So we have to think of new innovative ways to create new space for green infrastructure in the city. And we also think that very small patches and very small new public space, new public green space, we can realize in the city. So on the left bottom, you see, this is really what you see in Amsterdam. Everyone, because they don't have a garden, or maybe also no green roof, they just go out on the street and create their own garden along the canals. That's really popular. We also see more and more green facades. And on the bottom left, you see it's like a bioswale you were talking about, Henry. We try to create more and more of these in the city as well. So this is one is it's made right now, and people like it because it also looks really beautiful, and we try to create more and more of these bioswales in the city. So then we think that is going to be the green legacy of the third golden age. So it will be together with all organizations, but also with the public, innovative ways, but also creating new access to green space that is not well used right now. And we think that in that way we can stay a livable city in the future. Thanks. Any questions? Yes, what I showed you in 2011, we created a structural vision for the whole city, and was accompanied by an ecological vision. So then we looked at the ecological knelpunten. Ach, Niels. The connectivity problems. Well, hotspots. Well, and we saw that there were 180 of these problems in the city for hedgehogs and species like that, but also for flying species and the water species, well, all kinds of species. And that's when we started to try to solve all these points. And right now 100 of them are gone. And what we do is we have 8 ecologists in our department. And every time there is an infrastructural project, they talk to these the project managers, or well, they know what projects are on, and they try to immediately solve this problem. So sometimes it's with these stones below in tunnels. I'm not sure how to say it in English. And sometimes it's also with these bridges for hedgehogs. No, not hedgehogs, but squirrels we have. And so, yeah, we have a lot of knowledge about this. And last week there was the premiere of a new movie. It's also available in English. It's called The Wild City, and it shows how in Amsterdam we create space for all kinds of species, from kingfishers to storks to hedgehogs and squirrels. It's really interesting, I think, to have a look on. But it's only possible, I think, because we have these ecologists in our planning department, and because of there's a lot of politicians that think it's really important. So every time they if there's a new plan, they ask questions about this, and then we have to react. And we also have a plan now for nature inclusive building. So one of my colleagues is into creating buildings that are interesting for birds and bats. And it's really popular now, but it's, yeah, I think you really need the public and the politicians for that, because they asked for it, and then we can deliver. But I can show you, maybe I also have the information in English on the ecological vision. Maybe it's interesting for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I add, because I think we, like Geertje has told, we have also a tradition on creating, what's a nice term in Oslo, a highway for bees, but we have our own concept also in a tradition of our planning. We had the green axis, and actually it was a connection between the province and actually the western part of Amsterdam was connected by the green axis, connecting also these green wedges. And at a smaller scale, we had the term eco-lint. I don't know what's so there were already in our planning history, we used some of these concepts to envision the challenges for improving this connectivity.
If this is going to be the future, I might move to Amsterdam. What I'm interested in, you said you're focusing on quality because there's simply no space for quantity. And how do you deal with existing structures, with improving the existing buildings and like greening the facades and roof greening? Are there incentives for the owners, or is there some mandatory regulation that they have to do the improvement of the quality? And regarding to that, in one of your first slides, you mentioned the targets in numbers for green infrastructure. So how did you come up with the numbers? And does it help with communicating in reaching those targets?
Yeah, so for the existing city, we see that greening facades is not too difficult, because we don't use these really expensive, how do you say? You have these really expensive green wall systems, and we think they're not so sustainable. So before we focused on that, and now we focus just on plants like Klimop. I'm a biologist, but I forgot the name. Like, yeah, Hedera. Like these green plants that grow against, well, a wall, and that's not so expensive. But then we see that greening roofs is expensive, and we have a big subsidy for this. And it's only for existing buildings, because we think that new buildings, I mean, on new buildings it's not so expensive, because you can take it into account when you start planning. And for new buildings, we are also looking at ways of, like, because with tax privileges, that well, it's we haven't decided upon that yet, but that maybe that will be an incentive to create a green roof on a new building. So, and it doesn't exist for existing buildings. So on existing buildings, we now have the subsidy, and we have a scoring system. So if you can stock more water on your roof, or if you create a lot of possibilities for the biodiversity to grow, you get more subsidy. And if you don't do that and you only put like sedum, yeah, sedum on your roof, then maybe you can't get any subsidy at all, because when, well, a certain amount is reached, it's only the high score roofs that get this subsidy. So that's what we do right now. And your last question was, but oh yeah, the numbers. For the numbers of the green space factor we use, we looked at existing neighborhoods that are really green and have a lot of green space in their neighborhoods, and also accessibility of a park nearby. But we still have to implement these figures and really look at if it's going to work, because we think that in a few new areas it's not going to work, and we have to think of other ways. And so that's a process that will start now, and I think that maybe in a year time we will have different numbers, or maybe even different numbers for different areas. Because what we now did was we have living areas divided into center and mixed and green-blue areas, but maybe we can come up with even more different areas. So, but it's a start. I mean, because otherwise we didn't have anything, so we have to start somewhere, we think.
Any more questions for Hedda?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem we have is with rats and mice. And maybe, I don't know, Imke, can you tell something about programs we have to deal with?
Indeed, we have many rats. For every inhabitant, there's 1 rat, and for every inhabitant, there's 10 mice. The department I'm in, we also, my colleagues, they work on the pest control, so to say, but we have a policy that we do not want to kill them, but we also, yeah, they are part of the city, and in the movie Geertje mentioned, that becomes very clear. So our policy is to, yeah, because they are there for a reason. It is because there's a lot of trash on the ground, food is spilled by people, so we try to raise awareness and communicate that if you take out the trash and clean up, then you won't have a lot of problems with rats. So that's the way we try to deal with it. We are not putting poison, only when it's very, very bad, but we try to avoid the poison and try to, yeah, make their living environment not attractive for the rats, so that they will move away. So that's how we deal with this.
Thank you for your presentation. One question. We've heard about parks, green roofs, green walls. What I'm missing is, how about the good old gardens, backyards? Did you consider them? Is it worth to force this area too? In numbers?
I think that will be the focus for the next 4 years, because what we find out now is that it was a big step to, as a city, say something about like the roof landscape, because it's privately owned. But we did, so we have subsidy for this. But we know that there's a big amount of gardens that are being paved more and more. I'm not sure if that is what you mean, but that is a big problem, because mostly because of the climate adaptation. And in Holland, we have this, our government came up with a Delta plan for adaptation. And that says that as a city, we have to have an agenda by the year 2020 to how to deal with climate adaptation. So we think we can't solve everything by using the public space or maybe green roofs, but we really need the gardens as well. So I think that in the next years we will, as a city, try to create more awareness of what is so bad about paving your garden. And we also experienced it with people, because a lot of people, like, they are maybe old or not into gardening, and then it's easy to pave your garden. So what we tried now is to connect people, persons that really like gardening, with people that do not like it. And we thought maybe that can solve the problem a bit, so they can garden in someone else's garden. But then we found out it's really difficult because you have to access your house for other people. So it's not been a success yet. So that, well, it was a nice experience, but it's not a success because of the privacy and things according to that. But yeah, I think our focus hasn't been on gardens enough, and should be in the future. So I'm not sure if anyone has experience with that. I'm really open for learning about this.
Or if it's allowed to answer, because the question came from my stakeholder. In the Krebs project, we showed up when we were having the PSC meeting in Graz, a European project, the greening of urban inner courtyards. So there was a competition for it, and the people could do in not the real city center, but just around it, with the old buildings, with the old big buildings. And they got big results because the people were involved in the process. So before, they were standing the cars there, and we had a walk at the time when the PSC meeting was, and you could see the result. And it was not really like the real structures garden. It were the normal gardens with grass and some chairs there and some place to play, but not a real playground. So it was a big success because the people who were owning and who were renting the flats there, they were involved.
Yes, the budget is a city budget because we don't have any other budgets left. So before we had some from the national government or from the province, but in the city center we only have our own budget. And I think we have it because of the big parking fees we ask. So we have, like, it's called the mobility fund. And with this fund, a lot of green infrastructure can be subsidized, but we are thinking of new ways for investing in green infrastructure in the future, because it's not enough if we are expanding like we do and we want less cars in the city. We need new ways to get funds for green infrastructure. And then your second question, yeah, I can give you some information about this scoring system. And we also are looking at renewing it because we have elections in a few weeks, and we will have a new opportunity to create a new subsidy system for the green roofs. And what we find out now is that we were more ambitious than before, but not ambitious enough. So we talk with the water board and with all also with the people who developed these green roofs in Amsterdam, and they have so much experience right now, and they even say to us, you can be more ambitious than you are now. So we are talking with all these stakeholders, and we hope we come up with an even more ambitious plan. But yeah, I can give you some information.
But Geert, you forgot to tell about your own rainproof with regard to the private gardens. That we have this campaign on. It's called Steenbreek. That in a public campaign, but you can add to that. We try to stimulate private owners to replace impermeable surfaces by permeable surfaces. So getting rid of these awful solutions, stone in your private garden.
Okay, any final questions for Hete? Well, clearly there's an enormous amount that we've learned from your excellent presentation, Hete. Just three kind of summary things from me, which I think could be particularly important for our discussions after the break. The first is your point at the start about understanding what the user values are from green infrastructure and how we can help this community consultation to focus on what the function of green space is and make sure that there's a human scale to what we produce. The second is this really important point about, particularly for cities with limited space, but making sure that it's not just about new green infrastructure due to the limits of space, but also investment in green infrastructure and helping more people to benefit from what we have already. So this point about quality and adding value to existing green infrastructure. And I encourage all partners to think about the role of the planning system in that as well. So how we can get contributions from developers for new developments towards maintaining and improving existing green infrastructure as well as other subsidies that are available. And then the final third point was just a bit more about that point about subsidies and how we can create incentives for green infrastructure rather than grey infrastructure through our investment strategies. So can you just join me in thanking Hete again for her presentation?
I want to say one thing that I forgot. I sent Plan Amsterdam to some of you. It's like the story I just told you, but even more information. And I brought 10 papers in English with me, and I'm not going to take them home. So, and if you want, you can find this information on our website in English as well. But it's nice maybe for you or for every partner to have one of these to take home.
Thank you, Hete. It was really appreciated to receive that by the post. It was a lovely surprise. So we have just a few minutes before we have our coffee break. I'm going to explain what we're doing in the workshops after coffee. So I'm just going to get a slide up to show you. So you have all produced some fantastic diagrams of your planning systems before the meeting. What we're particularly interested in after the break is to understand how planning can be used to develop new green infrastructure and also improve existing green infrastructure. So what we're going to do is split you up into your peer groups, and we have 3 key questions which we'd like you to consider. However, don't feel constrained by these. What we'd encourage you more than anything is to think about your action plans and how you can learn from one another about the role of the planning systems in each other's areas. So the first question is the main one: how can we secure green infrastructure through our land use planning systems, and particularly focusing on what the points of intervention are within your planning and green infrastructure policies. So we'd like you all to start in your peer groups by showing your planning diagrams and explaining what you think are these points of intervention that you want to try and focus on in your action plans. The second key question is, what can we learn from each other's systems, and how can we promote investment in green infrastructure? So how can we pick up on areas of transferability, that we can learn lessons from how each other's partners are working? And then the final question is, can these approaches that we've heard about this morning so far, taken by the GLA in London and Amsterdam to maximize green infrastructure, be replicated in your partner areas? So just to remind you of your peer groups, they are Cornwall, Amsterdam and Styria, Ljubljana and Hungary, and Bratislava and Ferrara. We have 3 rooms available, which are great. So should we have Cornwall, Amsterdam, and Styria in this room? We will have Ljubljana and Hungary in the room next door, and then the room that we were in yesterday, Bratislava and Ferrara, and there will be a member of the TCPA in each of the rooms to help facilitate, and we have printed copies of your planning systems to help as well. So we'll break for coffee now and start again at 11:30. Sorry, Antonio has some information.
Just an information. In the hall, in the entrance, we have a show about CAMA, which is a transborder cooperation project between Slovenia and Italia about fortifications and green in historical cities. If you want to take a okay.
And also, just to add that we have 45 minutes for your peer working exercise, and we would like to have a quick feedback session. So please come back into this room after you've finished. Thank you.